Think how different that is from the way many organizations think, where their senior bosses are very proud of the fact that they've done a deal which is going to be profitable next week. Unlike this organizations whose bosses are thinking, I'm very proud that I've made this alliance because in 5 years' time, I think it could start paying off. This organizational mission, for the first time, it's about values. Next time you're in a strategic planning session, watch yourself. You sit there all day long. It's usually in a nice place with a garden and trees. And observe how you're feeling at 11 o'clock in the morning. If you're feeling, this is fantastic, I'm loving this, I love talking strategy, I love all these ideas, I love the fact that my boss is showing me stuff I've never thought of before, I'm loving all these speakers telling me exciting new ideas. Or if you're sitting there thinking, I really should be back at the office, I've got people phoning, I've got stuff I've got to get off my desk, I'm wasting time listening to all this mumbo jumbo, I've got emails, and under the desk you're sending emails to people. If that's you, then you can have a very comfortable career here. And I mean that, you could be the plumber. But if you're loving it, there's a chance that in your career your potential is to rise to more and more complex roles. Not better roles, more complex roles. As you move up, the time spans get bigger, your influence gets bigger, but your control gets smaller. There's nothing you do which has an impact. By the time you're here, so you're head of this organization that has national reach and has some international reach, or you're head of a division in a large organization that has international reach, not the fact that you've got somebody in your contact list who's got an international phone number. That's not the same thing. It's about if you're really influencing global practices. If you're setting up structures in other countries and you're trying to find synergies, that's when you know you're playing at this global level. Elliott Jaques was not entirely necessarily clear on this issue. He had originally said this goes up to level 7. Complexity reaches up to level 7. But then he got some flack from high-earning individuals who ran very, very large organizations because people started attaching pay scales to this. And if I'm earning X here, let's say $1 million, it would sort of imply, if that's the top of the category, that that's the ceiling. I can only earn X million. And they said, but that can't be true because I'm running this massive organization with thousands and hundreds of thousands of people. There must be a scale above it. And lo and behold, there was. So global frontiers emerged, global icons emerged a little bit later on in the thinking. What I want you to get the understanding of is this spread as you're moving up this ladder of complexity. Most organizations that you will ever meet and work with do their business here, in this realm. Most organizations that you meet do their business here. I had a fantastic service experience from a wheel company doing flat tires and things. I had 2 punches at the same time. And this company just rescued me, solved the problem, fixed a big problem, made it a small problem. I walked out there like I was walking on water, and they did everything there. They did everything there because they've got structures in place that allowed the mechanics to get on with the job. Most of what you'll experience in your entire careers falls between there. Some of you, one day, will be chief executives, will be thinking on a global scale. Some of you in this room, maybe one. Some of you will be up here, all one of you will be up here somewhere. Most of you will spend the rest of your careers in this zone, having very fulfilling, fruitful, engaged careers. Nothing wrong with it, it just is. Let me introduce you to some people I've met. So this is Andy. So Andy works in this organization, and he's working at the level of quality. And Andy has had a good day. Like a group of office managers I was once working with, I said, how do you know you had a good day? And almost with one voice they said, if we've survived, it was a good day. So Andy survived. He had 100 calls he had to handle He had to get rid of the calls within 3 minutes. His average was 2 minutes and 50 seconds. He had a good day. No one complimented him because people don't do that, but Andy's happy. What happened was there was a big deadline and Andy's workload increased and he just made it happen. Andy's very pleased. I'm reading a book at the moment by John Irving, and it's A Prayer for Own Meaning. It's a fun fiction. It's a great book. The narrator, is saying about his mother who's died in a baseball accident. As in many things, my mother could be extremely accomplished without being in the least original or even inventive. It's a perfect description of what happens at the level of quality. There's a beauty in that level of quality which I recognize. I love to see a craftsman at work, just doing beautiful work. But they're never going to create something brand new. There's a level of beauty in not being the least bit original or even inventive. Let me introduce you to Andy's boss. This is Andy's boss, Bill. So Bill has also lived through the same deadline crunch, and on the same day, Bill is thinking about his team. See, there's Andy in the middle of his team, and this is the rest of the team. And Bill's thinking, he's saying, the team did well again today. We smashed that deadline. I think Bill's starting to get an eye on his bonus, on his performance bonus. Short-term performance bonus for handling the deadline well. Bill's very happy. This is happening at level 2, service level. He's focused on service and on getting delivery through to the customer. This is Charlie, Bill's boss. Charlie's got a smile on because he's just lived through this day as well, but he's got a bit of a worry. So Charlie's at the level of best practice. Remember, he's the filler. He's the one in the vulnerable role. How should I organize things differently so that next time we don't have the same mad rush to beat the same deadline? Charlie knows that it's not all about succeeding today. Charlie knows there's another game to be played here. Charlie's focus is on improving systems to create best practice. How can I organize things differently? He's already looking to shift things around. Dennis is Charlie's boss. Dennis has got a big smile because he's got a wicked boss. And he's putting on a very brave face. So he heard from Charlie that things went well. But he also heard in Charlie's voice that there's a repeating problem. He's saying this issue of always rushing for deadline is a problem. It means we're in a constant rush. We don't end up improving like we promise our customers we will. So, starting in Q2, I'm going to increase the systems budget. We must disrupt the cycle once and for all. Dennis has got it in his head that if he really puts energy and funds and budget into building the system that Charlie's only just started to think is possible, that's the solution. Look at what he's done differently. He's not trying to paint it a different color. He's not trying to use the same knot to weave this thing and make it a nice knot. He's looking to change the system. He's looking somehow in his head. He hasn't solved it. But the question in his head is, how can I change the system? Dennis has got a boss called Elaine. Elaine's got a big, bright smile, but she's not a very happy camper. I've got the same challenge with my teams all over the country. If we don't get better at managing these routine deadlines, we're not going to be able to play our part in the launch of the new product in 5 years' time. If I can't get this organization ready to handle the daily stuff, when the business changes with a new product in 5 years, we're just not going to be ready. We need a new solution. So at level 5, she's starting to think about her organization's role in the whole world. Somewhere above her is a worldwide organization that she knows she's a cog in that organization. And she knows if she doesn't start getting it right, her cog is going to start slipping. It's going to start missing. What's her boss's name? Come on, we had?
Bill, Dennis.
Bill, Dennis, Elaine.
Andy.
Andy, Bill, Dennis. Andy, Bill, Charlie, Dennis, Elaine.
Fred.
Farida. Here's Farida. She's the Global Chief Executive Officer. So what is she thinking? She's not thinking about building an IT system. She's recognizing that something's going wrong at a different level. For her, it's an issue of values. It's an issue of vision. It's an issue of mission. When I meet the country heads, Elaine and her cohort, next month, I must give targets and a clearer vision. As a group, we have to become more versatile. For her, it's not about meeting deadline. For her, it's about versatility, being able to solve problems for customers, but also being able to change so that the products coming on stream in 5 years will happen seamlessly. So for her, the question is versatile. We haven't heard that from anyone else. And we have to find more efficient ways of delivering on promise over the next phase of our growth. She's not looking at today's deadline. She's not looking at this year's profitability. She's looking at growing this organization over the next 5, 10 years. That's Farida's challenge. That's what's happening every day, every organization around this issue of complexity. Any questions? Any thoughts?
So James, when we look at the fast pace of the world today with social media and instant stuff happening, the strategy really still 5 years ahead? There's talk that it's happening much quicker.
So we've always believed, I think, in the consulting work we've done, we've always believed that the most effective strategy is strategy by bundling a lot. It's about holding, we used to have someone working with us who spoke about the river of strategy. And he spoke about strategy is like a river. It flows towards a destination. You get to choose what that destination is going to be. Unlike another river, you get to choose roughly what his destination is going to be. You choose a destination in terms of the vision of what you're trying to do, the principles that you're going to stand for, who's going to benefit along the way from what you're doing. You're defining the end point of this river, but you're not defining what's going to happen today when you find a mountain in the way. And I think that's what people are arguing against. The argument that strategy has no place, that everything is reactive, has got to be flawed. Because if you're looking at what's driving constant change is massive IT builds. And a good IT build is probably going to take you 3, 4, 5 years to put in place. So how can you start a 5-year project without having a sense of what's pulling you into the future? No, strategy exists. What we have to do is not do strategy the way some people still talk of strategy, where it's this big, monolithic thing that can't change. Strategy exists, but it has to be versatile, flexible, adaptable. I want to move it around what we can handle and what we can do something with. And I want to bring in the theme that a lot of the people you work with, and as managers, a lot of the people you'll work with as subordinates or as your bosses, they tell you what level of complexity they're working at through their language. Language is the key telltale to this field, this whole issue of levels of complexity. Leaders reveal their current and even their future capacity through the way they engage with their colleagues, but also through the things they say and the way they say it. They show their ability and their potential through the way they frame their challenges and their solutions. Listen to someone facing a crisis. If they see it as a black and white crisis, if they see it that... So, I went to this tire place the other day, and 2 punctures, same place on the car, the rear driver's side, 2 punctures on the same day. So the mechanic who takes the tire off says, I'll fix this puncture, and then I'll fix the next puncture, and I'll put the tire back on. Level 1, quality, focused on quality, quick, simple service. The next manager, the person who came along, said, what's happening? Why have you got 2 punctures? I said, he said, no, but there must be something else wrong. Immediately, by the use of his language, he's telling me that he's playing at a high level of complexity. There must be something else wrong. What's he playing at? What level? 2, possibly 3. Because he's thinking systemically in terms of what can we do. Eventually, what they found was there was the car had been in an accident before I owned it, and there was a piece of metal which had started to scrape. So they just tucked it away. Systemically, the problem's now fixed. The mechanic at level 1 quality wouldn't have seen it. A good service level person who's done a doctorate in tires would have seen it. But this guy came along and immediately showed me his level of best practice because he started asking systemic questions. We used to work with a large retail organization with 11 brands, and we were working with trying to understand the roles being played across these brands. And we were trying to understand the level at which these roles were playing out. Let me get back to my... we were trying to understand the level that the roles were playing out. And what we discovered by profiling across all 11 brands, every brand managing director, every brand director, every salesman, every sales manager was profiled. Help me here. I'll give you a clue. Forget this part. It's retail. Retail's very structured, very disciplined. It's about delivery, it's about the detail. Where would you expect a brand managing director of a large retail store? Where would you expect them to be playing? How far into the future would you expect the manager of a large retail store to be thinking? Probably 3. Probably best practice. Not really 4. Once a year she goes through to the strategic day and then gets to spend the whole day playing level 4, level 5. But actually, when she's in the job, she's playing best practice. Yes, we'd want every managing director of every store here. So where would you want their managing the, let's say the store belongs to a chain called Beautiful Furniture Chain. So we're saying that the managers of every shop in the Beautiful Furniture Chain should probably be at the level of best practice. Where would you want their chief executive to sit in the terms of complexity? Obviously higher, more complex. So probably at the level of vision and values, level 4, possibly even level 5, depending on how the structure
It
works.
could also be a different version of 3. It could be a different way of being in a 3. So whereas the 3 in the store is involved in the systems and organization of the customer-facing thing, the regional manager or the guy who's ahead of that is looking at the distribution of things between the stores.
Okay, and I think that's a really important point. So let's, and it's not a point I've made clearly, so let's get this point very clearly right now. These are not defined complete bands. There is movement inside these bands. So you can play a role, and your role can be profiled at a low level of best practice and a high level of service. In fact, Elliott Jaques talks about if your role is defined as service, that means 50% of your time and energy should be put into managing that. The reality is that 25% of what you do is still going to be down here making stuff happen. And 25% of what you do is also going to be up here in the realm of best practice. So yes, that point is real. Maybe there's a different level of best practice that this person is going to be playing in. I would want Beautiful Furniture Company. I would want my group MD, oh no, yes, my group MD. Yeah? I would want my group MD to be solidly level 4. This is the not group MD, sorry. This is the person in charge of Beautiful Furniture Company. I would want the person in charge of Beautiful Furniture Company to be solidly level 4, playing down here in best practice, playing up here in the global thing, but every day I want them to be focused here. And I want them to report to a chief executive officer whose job is up here somewhere. I want someone to be dedicated to understanding what retail's doing in the world. This organization didn't do that. When we profiled, we were amazed to find that there was only one job across 11 brands, big brands, brands that you all know, brands that you've all bought from in the past. There was only one job in the entire group that was defined by the organization as a best practice job. Every other job, every brand managing director, every finance director, everybody, including the deputy CEO's role, everybody else was here, defined in the realm of service, with a 1-year time frame. Everyone's role, everyone was held accountable for the 1-year time frame. Immediately what that tells you is this, that everyone's driving to meet budget. It's probably very profitable in the good years. When things are happening by routine, it's working well. When things start to go wrong, who's doing the thinking? No one. What happened was the new Credit Act came in. Companies here had a 5-6 year time warning on the new Credit Act. This company didn't see it because they weren't looking for it. They were looking to increase profits. Most of their business was done through credit, but they delegated the new Credit Act, or the National Credit Act, they delegated it to somebody far down the ranks. It hadn't got the priority it deserved. A few things changed, including the National Credit Act, and within 2 years of us profiling and not listening to any of the feedback, the company disbanded, died. The whole organization, 11 brands, died. It was swooped up within another organization and doesn't exist today. Some of the brand names still exist, but the organization doesn't exist. This is mission critical stuff. It's mission critical at 2 levels. For organizations, it's critical, and for our careers, it's critical too, because we can make the same mistakes. Okay, good. Is this fun?
James, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Can you move from one level to the next?
Yes. And we're going to come to that very specifically in one slide's time. Okay, so we're not there, we're here. So the question is, can we move from one level to the next? Here's the answer, as we've experienced it through practice. Elliott Jaques talks about how as we age, as individuals, as we age and as we mature, we can expect to see ourselves gaining complexity. Not dramatically, but we can expect, and he draws curves. He's not very clear on how he derives the curves. I'm not sure how scientific they are. I think they're quite enigmatic. But he does draw curves which match our understanding of how humans mature. And he suggests that if you're a solid level 2 player now and you've got a whole range of things going for you, you can end your career as a high level 3 player or a level 4 player. He doesn't really talk about how that happens. But he does give us this. Now don't get scared of this because it looks slightly mathematical. Let me just describe this, very simple. Current actual capacity, the level you're currently playing at. Level 2, service level, professionals, learning the trade. The current actual capacity is a function, that's all the F means. And once you see the function sign, remember that everything that comes after it is multiplied. So if any one of those things is 0, 0. Current actual capacity depends on your cognitive power, not your IQ, but your problem solving, your cognitive flexibility, your adaptability, your ability to work with data that is either concrete or not so concrete. It's not that traditional Stanford Big Name intelligence stuff that used to be. It's a much more malleable understanding of a practical form of intelligence. And it's an ability to deal with the increasing complexity of the job we're asked to do. The V is values. And it's about whether you have personal values which match the organization's values. And it's about the synergy between your personal and the organization's value set. Times, knowledge and skills. There was a time, probably over the last 15 years, ending maybe 5-8 years ago, where the knowledge and skills that people had was quite devalued by organizational thinkers. There was a sort of sentiment that anyone could do any job. They just had to really want to. That's not true. It's just not true. Perhaps anyone can do any job, but jobs are so specialized and so rarefied that it's immensely difficult in the technological era for someone to pick up and run with a job for which they don't have the knowledge and skills. They can learn it, but it will take a long time. So now we pulled that right into the heart of whether or not people can do the current job. Do they have the knowledge? Do they have the skills? That's why apprenticeship is so critical. And I'm not talking bureaucratic apprenticeships. I'm talking sitting and grinding to know your trade. Wisdom is a general sense of maturity, and it's a general sense of personal integration that we bring to the role. And this is a beautiful one. He says, if we forget minus T for a second, he says, given the knowledge and the skills, given the value alignment, given the cognitive power, and given the wisdom, anyone can do any job. Isn't that beautiful? It's beautiful. Except, if they've got a personal style, or they've got pathology, which destroys their ability to get on with people around them or the team. So we see this a lot. We see it a lot. We see people who just cannot get on with the people around them. And we start to label them. We start to label them with big psychological terms. But what we actually mean is they're just disruptive. They're bullies, or they're completely self-centered, or they're abusive, or whatever. Jaques says, if you've got that minus T, which stands for minus temperament, negative temperament, if you've got that, sorry for you, but you're probably not going to rise up through the levels of complexity. So, can you change levels? Yes, you can. Cognitive psychologists, in the beginning of our use of this, told us you can't. The level you're at is pretty much, apart from this vague, obscure, maturing thing, the level you're at is pretty much the level you're going to be. I think what we've done, though, in some of the experiences we've had, is shown that that's just not true. And I remember one was a manager in a retail environment who was desperate to be successful. And not only successful for himself, but he wanted his brand. He was the managing director of the brand. He wanted his brand to take its place in the sunshine. He came to us and said, how do we do it? When we assessed and we tried to understand what's going on in this engine room, what we discovered was he and his marketing director and the finance director, and there was one other director, I can't remember her role, they assessed at level 1, level 2, and the highest was the marketing director, who had a little bit of level 3 best practice in her current actual capacity. So now, cognitive psychologists would say the brain is the brain is the brain. You can't change that. Fire them, get new people. But they were so desperate and so hungry for it that they started to take on the principles of this. They learned about this whole idea of complexity. They learned it. They studied it. They studied what it meant for them. And then using language, largely using language, they started holding each other accountable for thinking differently, for deciding differently, and for seeing the future of their business differently. They would actively fight against, when there were 3 or 4 of them, when they were starting to talk about strategy or about taking on a new supplier, and they were talking in sort of what it means to us this year, they would start asking the question, but what does that mean in 5 years' time? They would, every day, they were coaching themselves effectively. They had a little bit of support from us in the background, but they did the work themselves. They also had a lot of pressure, because they knew they were going to do badly in the next 2 years. But the pressure they placed on themselves was, what's this business going to look like in 5 years' time? By the end of the 5 years' time, they reassessed, and there was a scattering of levels 4 and 3. There was no one, well, no, I'm sorry. There was one person acting at a very high level 2 inside that group. They redefined how they thought and saw the business in that context. I don't think they changed their brains, but in that context, they built a culture, a leadership culture, where new standards were expected and new standards were delivered. They became the jewel in the crown of the particular group that they were owned by. And they didn't start there. They became that jewel over 5 years of thinking and trading. So yes, I think people can shift and can move. But I don't think everyone will. And I think that's really critical. Because when Jaques is talking, he's talking very clearly that there's got to be some sort of agency in here, some sort of human agency that makes someone stand up and say, I know, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this in a moment, I know how critical it is that you've got to want to shift, want to change, want to grow. So I think the reality is most people won't ever change their levels. Just remember what's happening here. At level 1 to level 5, there are two big continua that are changing. The first is, at level 1, people have very little discretion over what they're going to do, what they're going to focus on, what their priorities are. They're told what to do this morning. As they get up to more complex levels, their discretion goes through the ceiling. In fact, they wish someone would tell them what to do. They wish they had a boss who would give them some direction or give them some feedback or tell them they've done well. They wish for all of those things. On the other hand, one thing that someone driving a forklift truck around macro and packing the shelves has is control. They have control over the forklift, they have control over the fuel that they're going to go and put in, they have control over what they do before tea time, what they do after tea time. They're experiencing some sort of personal control and the control of their manager. They live in a world where control is a feature. The person being told at the other end of that organization